let's see if we are compatico on the Smoking Popes, who we've covered before in single form. I Need You Around from the Clueless soundtrack, but today we're going to be covering their third album, Destination Failure. And in the opener, you heard Megan, and now you're going to hear a little bit of Let's Hear It for Love.
Let's hear it for, let's hear it for love. Let's hear it for, let's hear it for love.
Matt, run them numbers.
Destination Failure by the Smoking Popes comes in at number 2,734 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 280 in 1997, number 16,893 of all time. It's the Smoking Popes' highest rated album on Best Ever Albums. Did not make Rolling Stone's list. Smoking Popes are ranked number 6,797 of overall artist rankings on Best Ever Albums.
Okay, well, the Smoking Popes are from the suburbs of Chicago. They have had two runs. Their first was from 1991 to 1999, and they reformed in 2005, and they are technically still together to this day, to the present. So there you go. The band is the Caterer Brothers, and there are three of them. There's Josh Caterer, who is the lead vocalist and guitarist, Eli Caterer, who is a guitar player and the backing vocalist, and Matt Caterer, who is the bassist, along with, it would be weird to be in a band with three brothers and then yourself, right? But in this case, the drummer of the classic lineup was Mike Falumley. Was the drummer. So in 1990, the Caterer brothers formed a trio called Speed Stick. They played exactly one gig in a friend's basement, at which point the Caterers' parents, because they were young at this point, decided that Eli, who was the youngest brother, would have to quit the band until he graduated. So Matt at this point decides to play the bass, and a gentleman by the name of Dave Martins comes in on the drums. They are recording songs during this time, and I'm not going to say they were waiting for their brother to graduate, but he would eventually come back on that timeline, if that makes sense. They changed their name from the original one, Speed Stick, to the Smoking Popes in the summer of 1991. It was inspired by the movie The Pope of Greenwich Village. Josh, you familiar with that one?
I am,
yes. Yeah, it's a 1984 dramatic crime movie starring Mickey Rourke, Eric Roberts, Daryl Hannah, Geraldine Page, and Burt Young. Wow, what a cast that is. Yeah, it was, in this case, Geraldine Page was nominated for Best Supporting Actress in that. So quite that guy cast right there, along with like peak Daryl Hannah, right, when she was quite the sex symbol at that era. So
and
interesting
definitely
cast.
Probably like peak Mickey Rourke too, in terms of like
peak
young
Mickey
and
Rourke
upcoming.
as a sex symbol too. Yeah, exactly. So Martins leaves the band, and that's when Mike Falumley comes in late 1991. They're playing some local shows, and they actually released their first EP called Inoculator on the indie label Radius Records. They then, and the type of humor that I enjoy, released a follow-up 4-song EP called The Smoking Popes Break Up along the way. They had not broken up, by the way, but they're just churning out EPs because early in 92, they released another EP called 2, even though it appears to be their third EP. So they're definitely going for something there with some ironic humor, I think. And pretty much the band seemed like they were on their way to like local fame, sort of that sort of level of fame, I'd say. Playing, not quite as a cover band, but like above that, right? Like a band you knew of dudes you went to high school with that were pretty good but never broke, right? They might have recorded their own stuff. But Ben Weasel of Screeching Weasel became a fan of them, the punk group of Screeching Weasel. Smoking Popes have an interesting history in that they are not a punk band, but they oddly got punk credibility throughout their career. But just a lot of punk artists like them. So in this case, Ben Weasel of Screeching Weasel becomes a fan, and he recruits a gentleman by the name of Mas Giorgini of the band Squirt Gun to record the Smoking Popes' first full-length album, Get Fired. The band gets a little bit of a buzz around that, and most notably creates the album Born to Quit, which I think has two things that are important about it. First, the song Need You Around is on that, and Amy Heckerling hears it and puts it on the Clueless soundtrack, which gives them more buzz. And Morrissey is asked to name his list of favorite albums ever. And he lists that album in his top 13 albums ever, which is, it's right there with like the New York Dolls and 2 Velvet Underground albums. So that popped a little bit. Because of, I don't think the Morrissey thing was as big. Probably being the single of the week for NME also was a big thing. So they toured England and Scotland off of that, and then they toured America with the band Jawbreaker. They were not selling super well at this point, and the record label, kind of in no uncertain terms, said that they needed a hit. And so they found the record producer Jerry Finn, a guy we haven't talked about a lot yet, but we're going to talk about him a whole lot because pop punk, like, what's coming, right? Sum 41, Blink-182, some of Green Day and Rancid, Alkaline Trio, all that stuff, right? He's associated with all of it, as well as what AFI sound is like in the beginning of the 2000s. So we'll be talking about him plenty as we go along, but he's brought in to do some work with them. And specifically, they wanted them to have a little bit more gloss to their sound, is how it was described. They begin to work on this album at the beginning of 1997, and the label executives said, we don't hear a single on this entire album when they submitted it, even with Jerry Finn working on it. So what happened was the band goes back to the drawing board and spends 6 days writing and demoing songs until Capitol finally said, well, we think that I Know You Love Me has potential to be a hit. With that, though, the label fires their A&R rep, and the album gets put on the shelf for a while. There's negotiations, all because the record label just doesn't see a hit on this album. And finally, reluctantly, Destination Failure is released by the record company in August. And at this point, superfan Morrissey invites them on tour with him. And he is quoted as saying that he thought that their early album, Born to Quit, was extraordinary, the most lovable thing I'd heard in years in music. So consider him to be a big fan on that. And this album ended up not having a hit. And as a result, the band breaks up in 1998 after a final tour, and they released their final album called The Party's Over. But luckily for all of us, in November 2005, the band, having been on the shelf for 7 years, became kind of a cult band for a lot of more famous bands. A album of people covering their hits came out, and they decided to reunite in November of 2005 and have been touring since then. So people were worried because one of the caterers converted to Christianity, and they were worried that he was not going to play some of the old songs because of some non-Christian themes. And he said, don't worry, there's only a couple I'd have to think about whether I'm playing, but I think in general we're going to play all of them. So they've been touring ever since, and there are even some shows this year. So if we want to go see the Smoking Popes, guys, we could still theoretically see them. So there's more, and I can build a little bit more into the bio, but let's start with Matt, because he's already telegraphed a little bit of what he's thinking. I was curious as I was hearing this album this week, what you guys were going to think of this one. I am, full disclosure, I am familiar with this album going into the week. Yep. Okay. And I put it on as sort of a conversation piece album, kind of like last week I put one on that was a hit, right? So we'll see how you guys feel about this one.
Yeah, so I was not familiar with this. I actually, when I saw Smoking Popes, I'm like, okay, I know it's a band I've heard of before. I remember we covered a song, but I didn't remember what it sounded like. It didn't really, it didn't stick with me. And so I was kind of like, is this going to be punk? Is this going to be, I knew it was rock. I just didn't know like kind of what direction it went in. So early on, I was very pleasantly surprised. I was like, oh man, this is like power pop stuff. It's very catchy. There's a little bit of a punk ethos to it, but it's very easy to listen to. It's catchy. It's got a lot of energy. It's got a bright production style to it. It's got a lot of, bigger guitar parts. And yeah, it was melodic, right? So initially I'm kind of going, I like this. And I never really got much higher than that initial take. I do like this record. I feel like it's scratching a lot of itches that I have in music. But at the same time, it's interesting you say, John, that they were trying. We can't find a single on this, right? We're searching hard to find a single, and that doesn't necessarily surprise me because they all kind of, I like them kind of all the same amount. And sometimes that's like an amazing thing, right? If you got like an album, then every song you like the same amount, that can be a phenomenal album. Or it can be a terrible album, I guess, as well. This is kind of like, it's still a cash album for me because it's just too catchy and too melodic for me not to enjoy it, or not to be like, yeah, let's put that on. That's an easy listening, fun album to put on. But yeah, it's kind of like that Social Distortion song we covered earlier. It's a little bit of a similar reaction in that, like, I'm almost trying to force myself to like it more, or really to like get into it, or to, really take it to that next level. Right. And this week it didn't get there for me. I probably listened to this about 3 times. And maybe a little bit more, cause I had it in the background sometimes that I wasn't fully attentive to it. But, yeah. And I don't know if like listening to it more would do much difference. Because I don't think that it's not like anything's hiding in here, right? It's not like I'm missing, some piece that's kind of like buried in the back, some interesting, intricate, instrumentation or what have you. It's pretty much straightforward power pop, which I do like, but it's also, I don't know, man. I don't know if there wasn't just enough big hooks for me that kind of got me to that next level or what. So this is kind of like, it's like a cash, but it's like, like a thumbs up, but it's like a middle thumbs up as well. It's kind of in that hybrid area. I don't know. I kind of want to like this more. I feel like I should, but for whatever reason, it just didn't hit me this week. I would be interested in hearing other records of theirs. Maybe there's other ones, like I guess Morrissey likes the one that came out before this. So maybe if I went back there, and I would find a few more things that would interest me. So yeah, a little disappointed. Like cause I thought when I first heard this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to love this. And it just didn't do that for me. And I'm not exactly sure why. I'm curious to hear what you have to say, John, cause apparently you can differentiate, or in your mind or whatever, this versus something like Social Distortion, which is kind of similar, but yeah, it's just, I'm finding myself sitting here tonight not really being able to explain why, other than it just didn't have enough big hooks, or it wasn't catchy enough. It was a good amount, but not. I've had better, and I was searching for a little bit more. So yeah, a little mixed on this, but generally speaking, it's a good album. It's there's a lot of fun here.
Yeah, my take is surprisingly like almost the same as your take, Matt. Like, and obviously, as the audience may or may not know, we don't talk about stuff before we discuss it. But yeah, I had the same experience. I was hoping for something, and there were glimmers of promise throughout this album that I really liked. I think, if I had to guess, I think John's going to respond to the lyrics. I think those are pretty well written and clever at times. But there are definitely... I was like, it was funny when he talked about the the record label saying there's no singles, because that's like how I felt listening to it. I was like, what is missing from this album? Why is there not like something grabbing me in the way? Even Need You Around, which is on the Clueless soundtrack, even that is like missing something. And I think in the context of that soundtrack album, it works. But there is... this is like a perfect example of a band for me that was like good, but just like not good enough, and it's missing that extra like paprika or cumin or whatever the extra spices that you need to elevate the dish. Maybe some more salt. I don't know. And in terms of power pop, which I think historically Matt and I are higher on than John. This is no Matthew Sweet, which John thinks, I think at times, doesn't have enough hooks for him. This is no Big Star. If we're thinking of in terms of the big like power pop bands, there's just something that's missing. I also don't like the fact that it's not punk enough. It goes to that sometimes, like in the first song, for example. It starts slow and then goes out really fast, but it's not like aggressive enough. And that it does that a lot throughout this album, where I feel like it's going to take it to another level in terms of like tempo or aggressiveness, and it never brings it there. The other big problem I have with this album is the lead singer's voice. I do not think I've been struggling. I've been trying to find a way to describe it. And unfortunately, I think it's like it's not masculine enough for me for this type of music. I think I need something. He's kind of got a softer voice, and that may work for like acoustic rock or something, but it doesn't work for this type of music for me. And so that was the other detracting voice. I found his voice kind of slightly annoying at times too, just in terms of the tenor of it. It's not whiny per se, but again, like that is like another element. I think if you have a strong lead singer that can like deliver the lyrics with more like earnestness or sincerity or kind of conviction, I think that could raise this band in my estimation. But that was the other big detraction or detractor for me on this album. So that's I'm firmly with you, Matt. I found this album a little forgettable, to the point where like I couldn't, like I enjoyed it while I was listening to it, but afterwards like nothing stuck with me, and that's not that's not a hallmark of an album that I want to return to. So I am unfortunately thumbs in the middle on this one.
Yeah, I'm definitely higher on this one than you guys are. I think this album, in a lot of ways, is what we wanted the Promise Ring album to be, in terms of how you, at least for me, I think that's how
I definitely like
describe
this much better than the Promise Ring album, I will say.
And the three things I really like about this and the lead singer's voice is an acquired taste. I get it. So if it's a barrier for you, you wouldn't be wrong necessarily in terms of how your ears hit it. He's not off tune or abrasive, I would say. He's more of a crooner in terms of how he delivers his lyrics. That's why it's kind of funny that like Morrissey likes him, because he has a little bit of Morrissey energy in a variety of ways, not just how he sings, but also like lyrical content a little bit. But the things I really like about this album is I do like the hooks on this album quite a bit. When it gets to the choruses, they're not huge, glistening, glowing choruses, which is I think why the record label and you guys both don't like them. I know, Josh, you mentioned this is not Matthew Sweet, and I'm like, yeah, it isn't Matthew Sweet, because this stuff hits my ears better. Like Matthew Sweet's a little bit saccharine for me at times.
Yeah.
There's nothing saccharine about this. This is more like a drink you nurse as opposed to a piece of candy, I'd say. There's nothing wrong with candy, and some people like candy more than like a craft cocktail, but this is a craft cocktail as a sound, is how I'd describe the overall chorus and package of his voice, to extend the analogy. I think this is a really good guitar album too. There's a lot of excellent guitar lines on this album and running bass lines that I really respond to. I think the guitar work is surprisingly good for a pop, an album that could be called power pop or even proto pop punk in terms of a little bit of what it's going for. And I just found that I really responded to the guitar all the way from the beginning to the end. The Starstruck one is a little bit more like true punk guitar, and then you have at the end it ends with Follow the Sound, which could have been written by REM or the Byrds, right? It's very much this like jangly, super jangly pop song along the way, and there's indie rock in here, but I found the guitars and the production appealing. It is a little bit of a lo-fi production. It's not glistening in the way a lot of power pop is. It's a clean production, but some stuff is pushed back, but not so much that you're like, oh God, like it makes the album sound bad. I think it really congeals well together. And you aren't wrong, Josh. There's like a lot of really clever, insightful lyrics on this. They write really good love songs. They don't write obvious or cheesy love songs. They write about universal themes, but like Let's Hear It for Love is a funny one because it's sort of like a cheerleader song, like Let's Hear It for Love, but then as you listen to it, it's like Let's Hear It for Love. It's this great thing where you've been waiting for it, and you know it's rips your heart out and totally ruins your life. And Let's Hear It for Jealousy and Hate at the End and Cigarettes, and like it kind of like traces the course of a relationship. Megan is the most romantic song about suicide by train I think I could ever remember. I've always loved that song. I just think it's really groovy. But yeah, it's about a guy who shows his devotion by going on the train tracks and waiting for Megan, and because he thinks she's going to be on the train. Of course, he doesn't, because, he's committing suicide, right? For a lot of different reasons. But the song, I think, is a clever, twist on that. They do a funny and good cover of Pure Imagination from the Willy Wonka soundtrack, which I always enjoy. And that's a 3-song set, by the way. Another highlight for me is I Know You Love Me, which I think has a little bit of similarities to You Say You Don't Love Me, right? Which is do you guys know the song I'm talking about? Like, you say you don't love me, but that's all right with me because... Yeah, anyway, it's another power pop. I think it's Badfinger is who originally sang that, but it's similar enough that I think it's sort of like an homage to that type of sound. I really connect with the sound. I could see how you would want this album to be 12 tracks instead of 16 tracks, and that by the end it might wear on you a little bit. Interestingly enough, when they get to Pretty Pathetic and Follow the Sound, they kind of change the way they sound at the end of it, which was a nice little surprise for me. So I wouldn't say this one was forgettable. I think this is one of the better power pop albums we've covered because it has a little bit more edge to it. And I like a little bit of the vibe of the Smoking Popes, like lounge singer meets quasi-punk rock meets indie guitar. It just kind of comes together for me. I could see why this was popular in both punk and indie rock circles because it's got just enough of both to scratch the itch. And I would imagine this would be a really good band to see live in a small venue as well. So I'm here for it. Thumbs up for me, for sure.
Nice. That was my other final note is I did not like that Pure Imagination cover. I don't think that song needs to be covered. I love Willy Wonka. I like the original version, and that didn't really move the needle much for me on their cover.
Yeah, I was expecting to like that more. That's the thing. Like, I was like, a lot of this is like expectations of the sounds because it's got, like I said, a lot of the hallmarks of what I like, but it just, and the lyrics I can't, I picked up on some of them, but not certainly enough to comment on it as a whole. But you're right, though, John.
It's a really good lyrical album.
And that's
for those that care about this. Yeah,
right, and that's great. It's just that's not something that's gonna move me to like get over that hump. And like that, my issues with it still remain. But you're right, I forgot about that last track, John. That Follow the Sound. That when that came on, I was like, oh, that guitar sound. Like immediately, yes, the birds and the jangle and whatnot. That was one of my favorite songs on here. So, yeah. But I guess I get a little bit of what you're saying about the vocals, Josh. They didn't bother me as much, but I was kind of getting it sounded like kind of like a little bit of a nerdy vibe. You know, and I don't know if it's a little because it's a little higher pitched kind of thing, but it was just that's
funny.
Yeah,
because I don't, and I'm the biggest critic of nerd rock times, right?
Yeah,
but I look at it more like guy who reads his poetry. If you're gonna go the nerdy thing, right? Like guy who reads his poetry and wears his heart on his sleeve type vibe, more so than like nerd rock, if that makes sense. Because I can't speak enough. I like love songs like this where there's legitimate feelings, but it's couched in the idea of there's a lot of sincerity to it, but also an understanding that it's kind of ridiculous at the end of the day to have these very romantic ideas. And he plays around with a lot of different tropes where he feels. I just think he does some of the things. They do some of the things sonically that Promise Ring did not, that we wanted, and they do a lot of the things in terms of writing songs, like love songs in particular, that like Ben Folds writes a different type of love song that really doesn't resonate with me, and this one resonates as much in the opposite direction. So yeah.
Nice. Okay.